Where's your playlist taking you? Down the highway? To the mountains? Or just into daydream mode while you're stuck in traffic? With over 4,000 hotels worldwide, Best Western is there to help you make the most of your getaway, wherever that is. Because the only thing better than a great playlist is a great trip. Life's the trip. Make the most of it at Best Western. Book direct and save at bestwestern.com.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Sooner Nation podcast. Big weekend for Oklahoma on the Diamond Sports, and that's pretty much all we're going to talk about today. I got to be honest with you, we're not going to talk basketball. Spring football's coming. We'll have plenty of time to get into that, but we're talking Diamond Sports, and we're going to start talking a little bit about baseball, and then the last two segments is going to be all about Oklahoma softball. Obviously, the second weekend of the season for the Sooners softball team, meaning we've got more to talk about there. We're going to talk about the shellacking of UTEP on Sunday. Spoiler alert, 34 runs scored. Not the scariest thing, in my opinion, that we saw Oklahoma do on Sunday in the baseball diamond. And then three questions I think that are fair, legitimate, and maybe pressing questions about Oklahoma softball after the second weekend of the season. But we're going to start with baseball. Let's jump into this, because for as impressive as what softball has done 2 weekends in a row, Oklahoma on the baseball diamond, pretty impressive as well. And they made a statement in Arlington. There's no way around that. And here's the thing. When a season begins with a statement, it doesn't just matter what you say, but how loudly you say it. And when you look at the opening weekend of the 2026 baseball season, Oklahoma didn't just set a tone. They projected just up to the rafters of Globe Life Field there in Arlington. They were loud enough that every team in the SEC had to take notice of what Oklahoma did over the weekend. The Sooners opened up with a perfect 4-0 sweep at the Shriners Children's College Showdown. Yeah, that's not easy to say. 3 of those games were part of the tournament, and then there was a bonus game on Monday. They captured the early season tournament title, and in doing that, they played against opponents that really mean something. Texas Tech was involved in there. Oklahoma State was involved there. A top 10 team in TCU, and then the capper on Monday was New Mexico State. So you look at that undefeated weekend, you can't say it was luck. What Oklahoma showed was balance, depth, and intent. That it was the kind of weekend that it doesn't just trim the early season narrative, it almost rewrites it entirely. So let's unpack for just a little bit why this matters more than just the 4 wins. First thing you got to look at is starting pitching. It didn't just fill a void, it dominated. And going into February, questions swirled over how Oklahoma would cope after losing almost its entire weekend rotation to the 2025 Major League Baseball draft. Depth was the worry. Not experience. They weren't expected to dominate, but that's what they did. What we saw from this starting pitching through the 3 games of the tournament was just excellence. Cameron Johnson sets the tone in the opener against Texas Tech, striking out 11 in 6 innings, mixing fastball, off speed. It looked like a veteran ace finding rhythm on opening day, if we're being honest. His command, early season conditions, is type of performance that really, if you're the coaching staff, you draw comfort from that. You don't just look at the box score. You are comfortable with what you saw from your perceived ace. But then you kind of look at the weekend crescendo. TCU, top 10 program, pedigree, expectations. They didn't even walk away from this game with a moral victory against Oklahoma. They were run ruled 12-2, 7 innings. Oklahoma freshman Cord Rager, he looked like someone who's been out there before. Struck out 8 batters. He gave Oklahoma a weapon that the rest of the league now has to plan for. So that's not a pitching staff that's just in survival mode. That's a pitching staff that's out there to make an impact. But we also know that when you look at, especially in a tournament format, pitching alone doesn't win tournaments. And I think what made this weekend especially loud wasn't just how Oklahoma won those 3 games of the tournament. It's when and why they did this. I mean, look at the lineup here for a minute. Every game of that weekend, the Sooners' offensive balance it just stood out. This wasn't a one-man roster. It wasn't a one-man show. It wasn't a small contingent of upperclassmen carried on, by their reputations from the previous seasons. Oklahoma's offensive team, it was, I guess you say it like this way. Oklahoma's offense was team-oriented. You got 6 home runs across the tournament from 5 different players. At least 6 different guys recorded a hit in every game. So you've got at-bats that force pitchers to battle multiple times throughout the order. And that's not a lineup that's going to settle for good pitches. It looks like Oklahoma has a lineup that makes good pitchers work. And that's the distinction of teams that usually win in May. A junior transfer, Daishin, I'm so bad with names, LaChance, he gave you timely production. Brendan Brock capped the weekend with a grand slam. Trey Gimble punished mistakes and finished the tournament as the most outstanding player. So this was not production by committee. This was team production. And now I get it because it's already out there. It's already on social media. Go to our Facebook page. By the way, we hit 17,000. 17,200 and change is where we are now. I know I've been harping on that for a while, so thanks for helping us get there. But now you know what's next. 18,000. We're going to 18,000. We want you to come with us, Heartland Sports on Facebook. And it's already there. People are already saying, Texas fans are chiming in. It's only February. The real season hasn't started. Does this weekend really matter? But the answer is, yeah, it does matter. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons why it matters. 1, confidence is contagious. A weekend like this doesn't just build your record. It builds belief. Young pitchers know that they can handle big moments. That was a top 10 team they beat in TCU. It was an in-state rival in Oklahoma State. It was an old Big 12 rival in Texas Tech. They know that they can handle these moments. Hitters know that they can grind against quality arms. The bullpen knows that it won't be asked to bail out a lineup. The lineup can support the bullpen. And that's a psychological edge that matters in baseball more than most people really appreciate. The second reason it matters, though, is because it reveals depth. The Sooners, they didn't just win because everything suddenly clicked. They won with different players contributing in different roles. You got starters who were locked in early. You got newcomers who seized their opportunities. You got hitters throughout the order showing that they weren't dependent on just one person. And that's the kind of depth that translates when the weekends get long and when travel becomes frequent, especially when you're going to the SEC ballparks around the country. And I think the third reason here is it answers the biggest offseason question about Oklahoma. Can the Sooners compete in its second season under the pressure and the grind of being in the SEC? And after this weekend, I think the answer is not just, yeah, maybe. I think it's clearly yes. And I know, again, I get it. It wasn't SEC competition that they were playing in Arlington, especially if you're going to throw in there New Mexico State, because that's the game that everyone's going to talk about because it was the Monday game and it was the closest game that Oklahoma played over the weekend. But again, you're talking about Oklahoma State. You're talking about Texas Tech. You're talking about a top 10 team in TCU. And they swept through that competition. You're telling me sweeping through that doesn't mean that they're not ready for SEC? I think this team's only going to get more grounded. They're only going to find more balance. They're going to get stronger in their rotations from the bullpen. They're going to get more in rhythm from the plate offensively. And again, I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. I mean, you got 4 games in a non-conference event, but they were against quality opponents. And yeah, that's not a guarantee of postseason success. We all remember seasons where, hot February stretches cooled and you became very mediocre in April. But the type of success that we saw this weekend from Oklahoma baseball, it matters. This is not a soft patch of scheduling designed to build confidence with easy wins. This was a tournament that included ranked competition, historic rivals, and a lineup that's built to test Oklahoma's new arms. And the Sooners answered every single test. So when Skip Johnson walked off the field at Globe Life on Sunday night, he didn't walk off with a trophy. He walked off with a starting rotation that has already earned trust early in the season. He walked off with a lineup that can score in multiple ways and a bullpen that hasn't flinched. You got freshmen and newcomers already producing like seasoned contributors. And that's a statement. And it wasn't understated either. In a season where every series is going to matter, where every conference road trip, every weekend set, every late inning at bat, this opening weekend, it didn't just win baseball games for Oklahoma. It set the expectations for what is to come. It told the rest of the nation that Oklahoma is not rebuilding. It told the conference that Oklahoma isn't here to make up numbers. What it said to the fans, to the opponents, to the team, that we've got a baseball team with a ceiling that is high, and they've got the tools to reach it. 4-0, it's not just a record, it's a message. And in the language of college baseball, it was loud and it was very clear.
We heard you. 9 years of Bring Back the Snack Wrap, and you've won. But maybe you should have asked for more. Say hello to the Hot Honey Snack Wrap. Now you've really won. Go to McDonald's and get it while you can.
All right, let's talk about the real reason you're here. Let's talk about Oklahoma softball. Let's talk about a 5-0 sweep over the weekend, 2 games Friday, 2 games Saturday, and then that monstrous 34-0 rout of UTEP on Sunday. Because you wouldn't think that Oklahoma played actually 5 games over the weekend. You would think they played 1. And that 34-0 route, that's what everybody wants to talk about. Because you look at that box score, you look at that number on the SEC softball scores online, and you're in shock. And that becomes the main headline of what Oklahoma softball did over the weekend. But if you want to just focus on that game and that game alone, the number that you should be focused on, the number that really talks about how dangerous this team is, it's not the number 34, it's the number 10. That is the number of walks that Oklahoma's lineup was able to draw on Sunday against UTEP. And the runs scored, not the story. The walks are. All 10 of them. 10 walks in a game that Oklahoma won 34-0. Now on the surface, that kind of looks like spectacle, right? It looks like domination against a lesser team. But listen what I'm going to say. What we're talking about here is not necessarily the domination aspect of it. We want to talk about the patience that allowed the domination to occur. The patience that should have every other program in college softball waking up in the middle of the night in cold sweats. Because when a team can score 34 runs, we talk about power, we talk about speed, we talk about relentless offense. But when that same team in the same game draws 10 walks, it tells you something deeper, something structural. It tells you that this isn't a squad that's built for one weekend against a weaker opponent. It's not a team built for the long haul. It is a team built for the long haul. This is a team built for March, built for April, built for May, and definitely that first week of June. And it does it the old-fashioned fundamental way. This wasn't passive patience from Oklahoma. It wasn't hoping that the pitcher would make a mistake. This was weaponized discipline. And that's what separates great teams from just good teams. Think about it. In a blowout like this, run rule game, most lineups, they chase contact, right? They hunt the highlight swings. They press, they swing early, they widen the zone, and they take risk. Why? Because the scoreboard already looks like a weekend highlight reel. So you might as well get on that reel. But that's not what Oklahoma did. Even in a rout of the magnitude of what we saw on Sunday, the Sooners refused to bail. They refused to confuse dominance with recklessness. They let pitchers overthrow. They watched the pitch out of the zone. They extended at bats. And twice in the 5th inning with the bases loaded, they didn't swing. Not once, not twice, but guess what? It ended up being 4 times in a row. 4 straight walks. 4 straight walks that brought runners in because they knew that the real leverage of the at-bat, it's not hitting harder. It was proving that you're not going to chase, proving that you have discipline. And that, my friends, that is psychology. That is softball intelligence. And here's why it matters. Pitchers, they can adjust to power. Defenses, they can shift against hitters. Speed can be coached, but patience, man, patience travels. It doesn't disappear when the lights get brighter. It doesn't shrink when the opponent is more elite. It doesn't tighten when postseason pressure arrives. If anything, it becomes more lethal when every pitch matters. And when the rest of the country tries to scout Oklahoma's 34 runs they scored last Sunday, they're going to miss the real lesson. Oklahoma's hitters didn't expand the strike zone. They refused. And what they did was they turned patience into relentless pressure. If we just talked about baseball, right? In baseball terms, softball terms, every walk is a tiny victory. Every forced pitch is a small error from the pitcher. And when you accumulate 10 of those in a single game, even one as lopsided as this, you're not just winning at the plate, you're winning mentally and you're winning at the point of attack. You have that advantage over the pitcher, whether it's the mound in a baseball stadium or whether it's the circle in a softball stadium. And let's talk about who was doing the damage. Because this wasn't a lineup leaning on yesterday's stars. This was a lineup led by fresh faces, newcomers, and players still earning their national reputations. Cheney Helton, first home run of her career. Alyssa Parker had a big day. Players who could have chased glory because they're young. Players who could have, obviously they hit the long ball. They could have been swinging for more fireworks. But instead, they played the game that Gasso wants them to play. They played it her way. Because here's the truth here. When you lose legendary bats like Tiare Jennings, Jada Coleman, they're gone. When they left, when they graduated, we had the questions. Would Oklahoma's identity change? Would new players chase their own numbers instead of the team's process? And Oklahoma getting launched in the semifinals of the Women's College World Series, that only aided to these type of conversations. And you're wondering, going in, now pressing, coming into a season for the first time in forever, it seems like, that they're not the defending national champions. Would patience erode now that the lineup didn't have a generational hitter anchoring seemingly every spot? And this game on Sunday against UTEP, it answered those questions emphatically. This wasn't a lineup leaning on some superstar. This was a lineup leaning on culture. It was a culture that values the strike zone more than highlight swings. It values pitch selection more than brute force and strategy more than spectacle. That's not accidental. That is institutional. And here's where this becomes more than, I think, just a fun anecdote about an absurd score, which it was, by the way. This matters because the games that matter, the ones that are going to be in May and June, they're rarely won by just raw power alone. Now, you have those moments, right? Ella Parker walking off Tennessee. But they're more so, these games are won by composure, by forcing one more pitch, by extending at-bats until the pitcher begins to lose confidence, till the pitcher's rhythm gets shaken a little bit, and ultimately they lose their command. You can game plan around home runs. Again, you can measure speed and you can chart angles. But what you can't do is you can't scout a lineup that simply isn't going to chase. You can't plan for a team that refuses to expand the strike zone, even when perfect conditions suggest that's exactly what you should do. Patience, slow, penetrating, relentless patience. That's the hallmark of championship teams. It's what separates fleeting power from sustainable success. So yeah, those 34 runs, absolutely absurd. They'll get the highlight reels they have on our website, they have on our social media page, they have nationally. They're going to get the headlines. But if you're really trying to discern what the 2026 Oklahoma softball team is, you have to look a little bit deeper. Because what terrifies the rest of the country, it's not that Oklahoma can score a lot of runs. We know that. Everybody knows that. But what's scary is that Oklahoma doesn't need to swing. It doesn't need to force mistakes. It doesn't need theatrics to win a game. The Sooners just win by waiting. And in a sport that measures success pitch by pitch, that kind of patience, it's not just a strength, it's a weapon.
My day kicks off with a refreshing Celsius energy drink, then straight to the gym. Pre-K pickup, back home to meal prep. Time for my fire station shift. One more Celsius, gotta keep the lights on. When the 3-alarm hits, I'm ready. Celsius, live, fit, go. Grab a cold, refreshing Celsius at your local retailer or locate now at Celsius.com.
This episode is brought to you by Peloton. Break through the busiest time of year with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus. Powered by Peloton IQ. With real-time guidance and endless ways to move, you can personalize your workouts and train with confidence, helping you reach your goals in less time. Let yourself run, lift, sculpt, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
All right, let's wrap up this episode of the Sooner Nation podcast. First of all, thanks for hanging with us. Thanks for being a part of what we do. Make sure you find us online on Facebook, heartland-sports.com, on our website. Wherever you're listening to the Sooner Nation podcast, please give us a like, give us a subscription. We really appreciate that. It helps us do what we want to do and bring you the type of conversations that a few of you enjoy because you come back every week. Let's do this last segment. Still going to talk about college softball, still going to talk about Oklahoma, but I've got some questions. And if college softball had a weekend that's designed to turn heads, this stretch that Oklahoma just had in southern New Mexico, West Texas, it didn't just turn heads. It twisted them all the way around. You got 5 games, 5 wins, a combined score of 91-9, 21 home runs. That 34-0 run rule of UTEP that we just talked about, it was one run shy of the program's all-time scoring record. But here's the thing. We're talking about a program that has reset the national standard more than once. Dominance isn't a conclusion for Oklahoma. It's the opening chapter of a much deeper story. And now the Sooners sit at 8-1, entering the next phase of the non-conference slate. The real conversation, it's not about how many runs they scored. It's about what this team is becoming and what questions remain as the calendar turns towards the grind of March and April. So what I want to do here in this last segment is I want to break down 3 questions that matter the most after what might go down as one of the most overwhelming statement weekends in recent history for this program. So here's my first question. Is this the most dangerous offense Oklahoma has ever had? Now, that's a question that past seasons might have felt almost disrespectful, right? Almost disrespectful to the history of this program, disrespectful to lineups that didn't just win championships, but rewrote what was possible in college softball. But numbers don't lie. Through 9 games, Oklahoma has already hit 38 home runs. That's more than 4 home runs per game. Over the 5-game stretch of this last weekend, the Sooners averaged more than 18 runs per game. Every single position player in this lineup has recorded at least 1 home run. Multiple innings have featured double-digit scoring. And then there we are, UTEP, 2 grand slams in 1 inning. More importantly than raw power, though, we got distribution. This is not a lineup that's built around one generational bat with helpers, stacked in there. This is a lineup that functions like a rotating storm system, right? We're from Oklahoma. We can talk about this. Like it's a rotating storm system. You got leadoff hitters slugging middle order at bats, changing games, and bottom of the order at bats emerging as menace after menace. So unlike power teams that can be kind of schemed around by targeting one hitter, there's no soft landing spot in this lineup. You take away the long ball and Oklahoma can still beat you with doubles. They can beat you with walks. They can beat you with aggressive base running and relentless situational hitting. And we talked about the walks in the previous segment. Even in blowout situations, hitters stay disciplined. They refuse to chase garbage and let the opponent, let them be the ones make the mistakes. And that is offensive maturity that you would expect from a team, I don't know, somewhere mid-April and beyond, but not in mid-February. So is this the most dangerous offense in program history? No, it's just too early to declare that. But it is maybe the deepest, most unforgiving, and hardest to scheme against. I think that conversation is very much alive and growing louder with every inning played. Here's the second question we will address as Oklahoma softball marches on. Can Gabbie Garcia actually sustain the incredible pace that she's on? And again, this sounds absurd again, but through 9 games, Gabbie Garcia is flirting with the boundaries of the NCAA record books. She's already hit 7 home runs. She's driven in 19, and her batting average is near 500. So if she held this pace over a full regular season, she would be on a trajectory not just towards school records, but towards NCAA single season records. Not hyperbole here, guys. This is math. But here's the real question. The more meaningful one, really. It's not whether she can sustain it. She's already proven that she can. The real question is whether she can do it when the schedule tightens, when velocity increases, when pitchers begin to focus, every scouting report are on slowing her down. And I think what's most encouraging, it's not just her power, it's her approach. Garcia is not a one-dimensional batter. She's not selling out for like poolside home runs. She's balanced. She stays within herself, and she's taking what pitchers give her. Her strike zone awareness, it hasn't loosened, as the attention and the pressure increases on her. And that discipline, again, far more important in March, April, and May than the sheer power she's showing right here in February. So pitchers, they're going to adjust. They're going to challenge her with movement, velocity, game plans designed specifically to take away her strengths. And if she responds with patience and walks when they come, and then she trusts in the lineup behind her, then we're not just talking about a record chase. We're talking about the backbone of Oklahoma's offense all season long. And if that happens, games begin to feel different. Pitch counts change, bullpens shorten. Opponents will need entire game plans just to try to slow down one player. And that's the kind of leverage every contender dreams of having. Gabbie Garcia gives that to Oklahoma. Here's my third and final question here about this team. What does this pitching staff look like when the margin shrinks? Now, this is the one question that Oklahoma hasn't fully given us answers to yet. And it's the one that matters the most once the calendar flips towards postseason play. On paper, the pitching numbers look pristine. Multiple shutouts, one-hit performances, clean innings, all the stuff that you like to see. But here's the nuance. There's no defined ace. That's not because the arms aren't talented, but it's intentional. Patty Gasso is managing this staff by matchup, not by hierarchy. She's distributing trust across 6 pitchers, making sure that each arm is developed, it's confident, and it's ready. So that philosophy has paid dividends in the past. What's it doing right now? Well, it's creating depth. It keeps opponents off balance. And it prevents overworking any single arm early in the season. Now, if we've seen one clear lesson already, it's this. When offense, it's not operating at full throttle, like the February loss at Arizona, that game season opener at Arizona State, when those margins shrink and pitching execution, it matters in a way that it doesn't in the blowouts. So the question now isn't whether this staff can be good, it's whether one of them can be great when it needs to be. Who's the one that you hand the ball to with everything on the line? When there's runners on base, when the count tightens, when an opponent begins to chip away, does Oklahoma have that pitcher right now on their staff? I think so. I think she's there. I don't know that she's 100% been clearly identified, but I think she's there. I think Audrey Lowry looks the part more and more with each outing. But the answer to this question, it's going to reveal itself not against overmatched opponents like UTEP or New Mexico State, but in those neutral site games against other top-ranked teams. What we're going to see this weekend at the Mary Nutter, that's where one swing can flip a weekend. But here's the upside on this. Oklahoma has the offensive luxury to buy time for the pitching staff. That doesn't exist for most teams. That combination, offensive potency with pitching depth, could become the formula that carries Oklahoma deeper than anyone expects. Of course, in Norman, we expect all the way to the championship series. So what's the bigger picture here with Oklahoma? I guess I'm going to give you a fourth bonus question. What's the bigger picture? At 8-1, Oklahoma looks like a program that understands the long view here. There's no rush to crown records or name the best offense ever. There's no desperation to force decisions about postseason rotations. There's only data gathering at this point. They're pressure testing. You've got quiet confidence. That kind of builds the dynasties that we're used to in Norman. So from an offensive storm that can hurt you in every spot in the lineup, to a generational bat becoming the offensive anchor, to a pitching staff being orchestrated with intentional depth, the questions aren't about whether Oklahoma is good. We know that they are. The questions are about just how overwhelming this team might become once all these answers begin to reveal themselves. And that's the kind of uncertainty that really terrifies the rest of college softball. Because one thing is clear here, after 9 games, this version of Oklahoma softball, it doesn't feel close to its ceiling. It feels like a contender. It definitely feels like a threat. It feels like the latest chapter in a dynasty that refuses to cede the narrative, even in the earliest weeks of a new season. Catch us every day, heartland-sports.com. Thanks for hanging with us. Enjoy your week, everybody. Boomer Sooner.
But I will